What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Milwaukee Sports Performance Podcast. I'm joined today by Jason Hoida. Jason is a performance coach at BRX Performance in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where one of our offices is located. Jason has been at BRX for quite a long time. He does a lot of the speed stuff, the strength and conditioning work there, and then also chips in on the throwing and rehab throwing side. Man that has many talents and wears many hats. I went to school for both exercise science and also with an emphasis in coaching and leadership. So we are going to dive into some baseball training things, how to take advantage of your off season, and then try to touch a little bit on some of the leadership aspects for some of the younger players as well and how that can play a role. So Jason, thanks for the time and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. I'm excited. First podcast ever.
That's great. We'll make softball questions, nothing hard. We'll keep the hard hitters for a future one.
Oh yeah, give me like 5-6 podcasts under my belt before we ask me any in-depth questions.
There we go. So I always like to just start with a little background to share with our listeners your background. So can you share your story a little bit about how you got into exercise science? Did you always want to be a performance coach? What was that path like?
Yeah, so I guess fairly unique path for me. So I started off as a business major at Shrine, and I had gone in with 16, 18 credits under my belt already, just with dual enrollment in high school. So I was technically like in my last semester of freshman year, going into my first semester at Shrine, and started taking business courses. And I went in at a young age. I'm very young for my grade. Didn't turn 17 till basically my second semester of freshman, or didn't turn 18 until my second semester of freshman year. So that was awesome. And started off as a business major. I'm just a dumb, like, punk kid on his own for the first time, away from mom and dad. Don't have anybody there to like hold my hand and make sure like I'm staying on top of my stuff. And, wasn't the best student. And especially I wasn't super engaged with the business side of things. I honestly hated all of my classes and thought they were boring. And I either didn't show up to class or slept through class. So that was my experience in business school outside of the marketing. Marketing, I did well. That's it. But ultimately decided to, after my first semester sophomore year, decided to make the switch over to exercise science, because I knew at the end of the day, when I went in business major, I wanted to open up my own gym. I wanted to open up my own training facility. I had this like big dream and idea in my head of like, what that would look like. And I thought I had the workout side, the training side all figured out, right? Being a dumb punk kid thinking that he knows everything in the world. So I thought I had everything figured out. And I was like, let's just go exercise science. I'll like be a personal trainer, or, be a baseball coach, something like that. Like I honestly, when I went to school, I was getting my degree to be a baseball player. That was it. That was my thought. Right. And then I got into exercise science and I just loved it. I fell in love with everything, loved the hands-on aspect. I understood that I didn't know my head from my butt. I did not know very much from the actual like strength conditioning training realm. And then I fell in love with the exercise science side of things and ultimately ended up wanting to be a strength conditioning coach and wanted to, be a coach that I didn't really have growing up. So that was kind of the path that I went down.
And then I saw from your bio too, it looks like you added like an emphasis or either minor or double major or something like that in coaching and leadership. What was the kind of impetus for that? Just to help with your goals of being a baseball coach, or any other story there?
Yeah. So a lot of the courses I took my freshman year actually were a part of that like coaching and leadership minor that I had. And I was like, well, I only need to take like 2 extra courses. Let's get it. And the 2 extra courses I took were actually like really, really like impactful courses I took. And I can't remember the professor's name, but he was just this very like motivating guy. And like I had him my freshman year, first semester, and I barely showed up to his class. So I never really got to know him. And then I finally actually got to know him I think it was my last semester, my senior year. And I like always look in hindsight, hindsight's 2020, but like looking back, I'm like, I'm such an idiot for not going to his class. Cause like actually getting to know him, he was such a good dude. I learned so much from him in that class. I would like stay after class a lot, just talk with him about, different stuff from a leadership aspect. Cause for me, I never like at BRX, I run the in-gym side of things, and I'm the head performance coach for the in-gym aspect, right? And I never really like set out to be, or I never really tried to be a leader. I think for me, my thought of a leader always kind of like the idea of being the one that everything is like kind of shouldered on, and everybody like counts on you. When I was growing up, sucked. Like it's not something I ever wanted to do. I never envisioned myself ever doing that. I didn't view myself in that light. And even now, like being in the role I am, I still don't always view myself in that light. But when I took the courses, like I started understanding a little bit more and a little bit more on like what it kind of takes to be not just like the best leader you can be, but kind of like the best version of yourself. One thing that we always talked about in that class was like, the best leaders are often the ones that, lead by example, the ones that, are willing to, make the sacrifices that are necessary to, help the team prosper. Right. And I would think about myself as a baseball player. Like I wasn't always the leader on the baseball team, but, I felt like me personally, I would do the things that, qualify as leadership. Right. Even though I didn't view myself in that light, but kind of, again, hindsight, like, oh, I guess I was kind of already doing those things, but now I just have a deeper understanding of them.
No, I think that's really impactful. And I think it's one of the cool things about progressing in business life, careers, et cetera, it's like one of the best ways to learn about yourself and grow and develop and things like that, just through taking on these roles that you maybe never saw yourself doing as a kid.
Yeah. Oh, it's so weird being like, I was such a dumb punk kid growing up that like my dumb self at like anywhere between the ages of 14 and 17, 18 years old to like, if you would have asked him what I'd be doing now, definitely would not have been this. Definitely would not have been this. And the roles and responsibilities I have now and like how I carry myself, or at least try to carry myself, and how I try and like, go about my business. Yeah, definitely would not have that 14 to 18-year-old kid would not have thought he'd be here.
So that's great. It's good to see the development process. Let's shift gears a little bit and chat about some high school baseball in particular and some of the in-gym stuff. We're in the midst of the off season here in Wisconsin. We've got 12 inches of snow or whatever on the ground outside. Playing baseball is not happening right now. And it's one of the few times of the year it seems like that there's not competition or showcases or anything like that going on. Let's just start with some of the mistakes that baseball players make during the off season that you see a lot. So like what kind of bad habits do you see that come through your door every winter this time of year?
Well, I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of assessments with athletes over my time being here. And there's a couple commonalities that I've seen. And athletes will make mistakes, right? They're kids, right? They're not going to do everything perfect. And like our jobs as coaches is to, help kind of like give them the guidance and just educate them on certain aspects of, the training, the process, how to help themselves develop it. And like whether or not they train with us, right? Like at the end of the day, when we go through assessments, I want athletes to leave here, whether they decide that they want to be a part of BRX or not, to leave with something and leave with a little bit of knowledge on what they need to do to help themselves going forward. And one of the biggest things I see a lot from athletes coming in is, take multi-sport athletes, right? We have a lot of multi-sport athletes that come through our doors, and, the throwing side of things is more so the case with this, but they often think that, okay, during the fall, I play football. I'm just a football player. I don't do anything baseball related. During the winter, I'm a basketball player, or a wrestler or whatever it may be. That's what I focus on. And that's the only thing that, I do in that time. And then basketball season ends sometime like late February, early March. And then baseball tryouts are 2 weeks later, right? And the amount of guys that we have come in that, December, January, have not touched a baseball, have not touched a bat. And they got baseball practice and baseball tryouts 3 months from now. It's like, what are we doing? Yeah. Right? Like at the end of the day, when you're a football player, when you're a basketball player, like obviously like do those sports, right? But we have to be able to understand like what our priority is, right? If you truly want to, most of our athletes come in, they say they want to play college baseball, right? If that is truly the case, we have to understand that, your baseball development has to be a priority no matter what time of year we're in. If you're a football player or you're playing football, but your main focus is baseball and you want to play college baseball, guess what? During football season, we have to still work towards developing your baseball skills, right? And it doesn't have to be the same level of development that you do during the actual baseball season, but we have to do something, right? Like our football players, like I have like 6 guys that play football and baseball, and they're all main baseball players. During the football season, I have them throw at least 2 or 3 times a week in some capacity. They're not doing high intent throwing. It's just keeping the arm in shape. So that way, once we get done with football, we're hitting the ground running from throwing stand, right? They're getting their lifting done. They're getting their mobility. They're getting their arm chair. But a big thing, and we talk about this as a staff because it's one of our, biggest headaches that we go through is that, guys get to these seasons and, get to their other sports. And then it's just cold turkey. I don't train. I don't lift. I don't throw. Like baseball development stops. That's just not the case. It's not reality of how it should be. Right.
We see that a lot. And the only thing that is even worse than what you described is when they also are in our office because it's like, yeah, my elbow hurt at the end of the last season. I just assumed it was going to be fine. So I didn't do anything because I was playing basketball. My elbow felt great. And now as soon as I touched the baseball, my elbow hurts again, shockingly.
Yeah.
That's
it magically was just going to fix itself.
I know, exactly. I think that one of the other things that's really interesting to think about, and you are getting at it, but in this year-round sports culture that we're now in, where there's always a showcase, there's always a practice, a tryout, a game to be played somewhere, the amount of time that kids have during off seasons is much shorter. And I think that it makes people start making interesting choices on like the efficiency. And it's not just, is this the right thing to do or should you do this? It's what's the time cost of that and what's something else that you're not doing because you're making this other choice. So what are some of the biggest time wasters that you see kids doing in their off season that they should really be developing or they should really be using to help their development more?
God, this is a loaded question. I could get myself in trouble with this one. I think the big thing, and like, this is a common thing that comes up in assessments that I do, like multi-sport athletes, for example, right? So I had an assessment. It was like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, sometime in November. The kid is a football player, basketball player, baseball player, right? 3-sport athlete, Mr. Athlete, right? And I am totally fine with athletes playing multiple sports, right? And especially at a young age, I encourage it, right? He came in and he's underdeveloped in the skill set of baseball, right? But he wants to play college baseball. He is in his junior year now. I think he's 2027. But for him, he does all these sports. And I asked him, like, and I always tell assessments, like, I will never, ever, ever tell a kid to quit a sport that they love, right? If you love football, play football. You only get football for so long. If you love basketball, play basketball. You only get these opportunities and these moments in your high school career and your childhood for so long, right? But if you're playing another sport for, you play basketball because, you think it's going to make you more athletic for baseball, or you play football because you think, you're going to get stronger for football and it's going to translate over to baseball. That's where, like, I see guys the most wait time, right? Like, they're only playing these sports because they think it's going to get them better for another sport. That's just not the case, right? Like, baseball is a skill. Guess what? To get better at baseball, you got to be good at baseball. You got to work at baseball, right? And like, from a strength standpoint, you can get really strong and really athletic, not lifting like a football player, right? Like, football players are some of the elite athletes in the world. But from a baseball context, like, they're not that powerful. They're not that strong. Some of them are. But in the vast majority of cases, it often hinders you versus helps you, right? So, like, we've seen a lot of athletes play multiple sports and do these sports for a really long time because they think, one, it's just like what they're expected to do. They don't even like the sport. They're just playing it because they're good athlete and the coaches, like, beg them to play whatever it may be, or they think it's going to help them with baseball. And that's just not the case.
I think that's really good. And again, I think it's just becoming more and more important as kids get seemingly busier and busier. It's crazy as I'm a parent now, even just on the day to day. It's my son's about to turn 8 and we say no to a lot of stuff and he still has something to do every single night and at least one day on the weekend. And there's 27 other things that everyone's telling us we should be having him do.
Right.
And it's
And
just
he's
something that
eight.
I know. It's just something, it's not all sports, it's piano lessons and this, that, and the other. And they're all great things. And it just gets to be this time cost thing and this efficiency. And you got to decide one or the other. And the youth world is definitely different than when I grew up and how many demands they have on their time.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think the off season obviously is one of the best times, and why we're chatting with you right now, to build strength and power in baseball players. So I guess from just a big picture perspective, why is baseball a sport that strength and power is very specific? You mentioned this with football, and what are some of the specific differences between baseball and other sports, and how does developing those physical skills help in the actual on-field performance?
Yeah. I think a big thing for that is, the context is key, right? And it's depending for every athlete, right? Like you look at MLB guys, you have, everybody throws 100, everybody throws, 95 plus, whatever it may be. But like you look at the body types, you look at the training styles, you look at, how they move and everything like that. Like everybody is like context dependent, right? You got guys that are 6'5", 185 pounds, like what Jacob Crum's around that height and weight. Like he throws fuzz. And I know he's not a super strong guy, right? Like he's super lengthy, wiry, does not have a lot of like, strength in terms of weight room sense, right? But he's super elastic. He moves really efficient. He can produce a lot of output in, the windows that he needs to, right? Versus a guy like, oh God, he was a big donkey on the Dodgers back in the day or a few years ago. Bruno Gratterall, I think. But like that dude is like 6 foot 240, just like a house of a human being. And he looks like he's just flicking 100 and 102, right? So like you have all these different body types and you have all these different, movement profiles and everything like that. But the biggest thing from a strength standpoint is like understanding what you need as an athlete, right? Like not everybody needs to be able to lift a house, right? Strength helps in a lot of ways to overall produce, more force and more output, but you don't need to be able to squat 500 pounds to be a good baseball player and be able to throw hard. You don't need to deadlift 400 pounds or 500 pounds, whatever it may be, or bench press 315 or anything like that to be a good baseball player. You have to have like, I would say a certain base level of strength, to be able to get to the desired output needed. But it's, again, context. We have to be in a good spot from an output standpoint, a physicality standpoint, as well as be able to move really well from a skill standpoint. And if one of those two things is way past the other, then we're probably lacking somewhere, right? Like we've seen a lot of guys that come in here that have really clean mechanics with a swing or really clean mechanics from a throwing standpoint, but they're 130 pounds soaking wet and they throw 75, but they move so well, but they just don't produce a lot of force. Like those guys, they need the strength side of things. They need to build the physicality. Then you got the guys that are house of a human being and like super strong and super athletic, but you watch them throw and you question why they have a baseball in their hand. They look like they should be a middle linebacker somewhere, right? Like, and like it looks painful when they throw, right? Like they need more of the skill development side of things, along with, probably some, movement quality and movement capacity work, some armchair stuff, different context, right? And that, we call them baseball Billy, the average athlete or high school athlete. That's like, 5'11", 140, 150 pounds, soaking wet, like just a guy that, needs to develop from a physicality standpoint. And then you got the I don't know, jacked Johnny, we'll call him, the guy that's super strong, the football player, the 3-sport athlete, Mr. Athlete, but doesn't have a whole lot of skill development, right? So I think the biggest thing is like strength is like very context dependent, but it can help everybody in some aspect.
So we talk about it a lot with different sport, but we look at golf, and one of the best physical predictors of club head speed when you look at PGA Tour stuff is vertical impulse, not necessarily jump height because of differences in body weight and stuff, just how hard someone can push down. And theoretically, like basketball players are some of the best, jumpers, produce the most vertical impulse of almost any athlete. And usually if you watch those guys swing a club, it's pretty ugly. Like when you get them rotating, things like that. And so that's where it's the combination of that. I think you're getting at something that's really interesting that we talk about with there's like these thresholds, whereas if you can't hit certain things, you're gonna bump up just against the horsepower issue, or you put so much stress on having to be perfect mechanically, and you just have no buffer. Whereas if you've got a little bit of a bigger engine, it gives you a little bit more leeway as well. How do you guys go about assessing or working on? Baseball's obviously very rotational, probably more so than almost any other sport. Mixing in, building strength and power, but then also try to make it very plane specific for the athletes.
So for us, like it's more so like from a program side of things, how we kind of develop the programs based off like the athlete's needs. Like when we go through the assessment process, like the first part of the assessment process is ultimately seeing, okay, like, what physical limitations do guys have, right? Are we, we go through a movement assessment, want to see, is there anything in their squat that they, are struggling with? Is there, certain deficiencies from like range of motion side of things? We want to see like more passive stuff there. And then a part of our one-on-one process, and like basically, an athlete decides, hey, I'm going to commit to training the BRX. We go through a one-on-one where basically we're going to take them through some basic movement skills in a weight room setting, see how they move under load. We'll also typically go through some force plate testing there, depending on like, age of athlete and things like that, where they're at in their development process to kind of see overall like output side of things. And from there, we can get a deeper understanding of like, okay, what does this athlete truly need? Because if we just go off of like, okay, like, he doesn't have a whole lot of range of motion here, doesn't have a whole lot of range of motion there, and just solely build it off that, then, we miss a little bit of that context for the athlete, right? But for us, like, and everybody at BRX kind of programs slightly different, right? Each coach has, their athletes that they're in charge of. We all help each other's athletes, and we all work with each other's athletes. But for me, I have, I think 46 athletes when I checked this morning. So I have like currently 46 athletes I work with. And so I write their programs, right? And for them, I have a certain like programming style and how I kind of build out those programs. So for those guys, typically early off season, we're going through a lot of like heavier strength stuff, more like the foundational side of things, heavier loads, higher volumes, things like that, just build the overall physical capacity. And then as we actually get around like, December, January, we're kind of working on like that speed strength side of things. So I do a lot of like conjugate and contrast style training, and, try and work both like dynamic output as well as, overall like maximal effort output to try and build both sides of the engine, right? We do a lot of medicine ball throws, a lot of power and plyometric work. I'm a huge medicine ball guy. I love throwing medicine balls. That's my thing. But from that standpoint, like each coach at BRX can, have the freedom to, program how they see fit, but we all kind of follow this kind of similar structure of, time of year and periodization and things like that.
Yeah, no, and I think it's really important. It's something that we talk about a lot, that there's a big difference between training and working out. And it's relatively easy to go work out and go to the gym and do everything that you probably thought you knew how to do when you were a young college kid that didn't think you needed the exercise science degree. But when you actually start getting into how do you develop these skills over a long time period, it's really interesting. I share this story a lot with people. When I did one of the force plate classes that we went to early in my career up at the Canadian national ski team, like headquarters, they're like Olympic Village in Calgary, with a guy named Matt Jordan. He's one of the brightest strength coaches, PhDs that I've ever talked to, especially force plate wise. And they look in 4-year increments. Like they like really focus on Olympic training cycles, where they're truly like breaking down this development over a 4-year period, or if a kid's 12, it might be an 8-year period. Like, how do we get them to peak 8 years from today? And I'm like, that's a little intense and insane, but it's just really interesting when you get into some of these elite levels and like the choices they make at different times when they're looking this big a picture. I'm like, yeah, this is different.
Oh yeah. How would you, that's got to be so much thought and so much like just brain power to think of like, okay, what does his development look like over the 8-year span and period? Like that's got to be I would lose all of my hair. I'm already losing most of it. I would lose all of my hair.
Yeah, no, I know. It's just fascinating as you start getting into hitting at it. And it's one of the mistakes that you mentioned earlier with kind of this periodization and building towards this skill development and things like that. You mentioned one of the biggest mistakes is the athletes that don't throw at all over the offseason, don't touch a ball till 2 weeks before high school practice. We see it a ton, a little later than you, because we usually see them 2 weeks after they start practice when their arm's blowing up. But when would be an ideal time for someone to start throwing, and what does that early off season just ramp up element look like in a best case scenario?
Well, you kind of mentioned it before of like how, the off season gotten shorter, right? And
Yeah.
like things from, a exposure standpoint have gotten different, right? So it's hard to stay for everybody, right? It all is, again, context dependent, right? How much did, like, I'll use a pitcher for example. How much did that pitcher throw in high school guy? How much did he throw in the spring? How much did he throw in the summer? Is he playing fall ball? Is he doing another sport and playing fall ball? We've had a lot of athletes that, are also football players or fall sport athletes that also played fall ball at the same time. And so it's like, when to start throwing, when to stop throwing, what's your shutdown period look like? What's your deload period look like? It all can be kind of this big mess because there's also like these showcases and, college recruiting camps are happening a lot in the fall. So like guys don't really have the luxury of shutting down for, a longer period of time to give their arm a rest. Like they got to be ready for this, college camp in October, and their fall ball season just ended, in the middle of October, and they got to be ready for by Halloween or sometime in November. The schedule and how the baseball recruiting scene and the exposure scene have kind of like changed over the past few years has really made it harder for, athletes to understand when they don't have guidance to know when should I stop throwing? When should I start throwing? And it just becomes this big mess because you have so many other things that, play a role in it. I think like from a general sense, if, the guy or this athlete, played high school ball, played summer ball, isn't playing fall ball, I would say, depending on how much he threw or how many innings he threw and how his arms felt after the summer, okay. I usually have guys, whether they feel good, whether they feel terrible, they have a small shutdown window. So I'll use one of my athletes, Brady, as an example. He shut down for 3 weeks. Didn't really have any issues in the summer. His arm was getting just a little fatigued, a little banged up, but nothing like major concerning. Shut down for 3 weeks. Start slowly ramping up, and he's got like a longer ramp up process for him. He didn't throw his first high day until probably beginning of November, I believe, was his first high day. And now it's like just slow cooking and getting him ready for his season. We're not in a rush for anything in terms of like camps or showcases or anything like that because he's already committed. He doesn't have anything that he needs to like really be prepared for from that standpoint. So like his ramp up is a lot longer and a lot slower cooked. It's a lot easier for him. I have another athlete who he just did a college camp 2 weeks ago, but he came off of the spring and summer, throwing a lot of innings. His shoulder was cooked and he was in, a significant amount of fatigue and discomfort. And so, but he really couldn't afford to shut down too much. So we had a 1 to 2 week shutdown period and we had to ramp up and get him ready for that college camp. And it's like, I don't want to do that with him. I would prefer he doesn't go to that camp, but ultimately it's not my decision. I have to, try and help this athlete get as prepared as possible for his college camp that he has signed up for, paid for already and done. That's the situation that we're put in. And so like everyone's schedule and everybody's ramp up is going to look a little different. And it's all just based off of what did you do in spring, or how much did you throw in the spring? How much did you throw in the summer? Did you play fall ball or not? And do you have anything coming up immediately? And if you can if an athlete's watching this and you can think about those things and figure out what's my schedule going to look like. And I try and tell guys you need basically a 2-3 month period of knowing what that schedule is going to look like for the next 2-3 months. If there's any events, camps, anything that I'm looking for, needing to be ready for. If there's nothing there, we can have a slower on-ramp and it's quote unquote safer on-ramp process. If we have something that we have to get ready for, okay, then we need to start throwing sooner rather than later. All right, and we need to start this development process quicker.
I think that's really good advice. And there's just so many people. It's probably the most common question that we get asked. And there's just so much nuance. How old are you? What's your injury history?
Yeah.
Inning counts from last year? Where are you at development wise? Are you throwing hard enough already? Do you need to be like, there's just so many variables. But I think the point that I want to emphasize to people and that you mentioned is building backwards from that start, from that date, like having I need to be able to do this on this date, and having like clear communication with your coaches of, okay, practice is starting. That doesn't mean you need to throw a 7-inning max effort bullpen that day. It might be like 20 pitches. Like that's a different level. But if it is, hey, that first outing, I'm going to be expected to throw 100 pitches and go a whole game. It's really not smart. But if that's what we have to do, then we need to prepare you to do that less than ideal process. But we do you a disservice to prepare you for 20 pitches and have the expectation be that you go and throw 80, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One question I got for you about that is like, being in Wisconsin, right? And, we cold weather state, baseball starts, April is typically first games.
Yeah.
Still know it's probably on the ground. It's cold out. And like one thing the battle that I have been fighting with athletes and pitchers specifically is like getting them ramped up and ready to go for their season. And like you've worked with, big leaguers and pro guys all the time. Like, most of those arm injuries typically happen in that spring training period in the earlier in the season, right? And that's when workloads are typically not where they necessarily need to be, but guys try and push through it. And I've been trying to get this point across as much as I can to, our athletes, but it's guys want to just go 100 pitches right out the gate. First start of the year, 80, 90, 100 pitches. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I have my own thoughts, obviously, but like, what are your thoughts from that standpoint? How should guys kind of like manage their own arm and workload in the beginning of the year so that way by the end of the year, they're not fried?
Yeah, I agree. I think I know where you're going with this, and I agree completely. My preference is to have everyone build up and start around a 2-3 inning outing in that 40 to 50 pitch window typically. Our recommendation is we'd like your bullpens to exceed your in-game pitch counts by 10 to 15 throws and simulating some up downs within those. Because what we see from an arm stress standpoint is I don't care how hard you're trying to throw max effort in a bullpen or in practice. Once the adrenaline is going and you're in-game, outside, on cleats, all of that stuff, typically velocities tick up, which arm stress is going to tick up. Typically every mile an hour is going to be an extra 2-ish degrees of layback and an extra few newtons of force on the inside of your elbow. And so we try to get the bullpens at a higher count, whatever your bullpen was at, which often 50 is a good target. We'll say 40 in-game pitches is then a good target. And then from there, trying to add 10 to 15 pitches or 1 inning per outing over the course of the season, which in Wisconsin then typically gets to the standpoint that by playoff time, like the end of conference play, those pitchers are relatively well developed and workloads are relatively built up where it's okay. If you're going to go a whole game, like throwing 100 pitches, like I'm not sure we need to be doing that at the high school level, but if we do it 2 or 3 times at the end of the year, that's different than doing it every single week all season long. And that's in particular for the kids that are going to go play travel baseball over the summer. It's an athlete that just wants to play high school ball, and that's really their main focus. I'm a little bit more laid back. It's cool. Let's go sell out and use it all up. So yeah, that's my guidance. It doesn't always get listened to. I really encourage the athletes to communicate early and establish the expectation. And then again, if we are in a situation that's not what is going to happen, then we need to prepare you for that. If it's 70, 80 pitches that first outing, I really don't want to get into 90 pitch bullpens in February, but we need to throw more than 50. We got to close that gap a little bit at least to get you prepared.
Like that's a uphill battle that I've been fighting with a lot of guys. And like when I talk with the guys and talk with the families as well, like a lot of them understand, hey, he probably shouldn't throw 80, 90, 100 pitches in 40-degree weather his first start of the year, first 2 starts of the year, 3 starts, whatever it may be. And I've noticed, athletes aren't necessarily great at advocating for themselves with their high school coaches of like, hey, coach, like, I don't feel comfortable going or 80 pitches, 100 pitches. Like, I feel comfortable going this range. Right. And like, I think that's the uphill battle that I've been fighting with this process of, trying to get guys to be their own best advocate and their own, coach to a point, and to make sure like they're putting their baseball careers and their best interests in the forefront. Because at the end of the day, you only get one baseball career. And if you're really serious about playing college baseball, like, you have to do what's necessary for yourself to, put yourself in a good spot to, have a good high school career and be able to, be ready for, your summer season, summer circuit, and all those things. And I think that like we're dealing with high school kids, right? 14 to 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. Like, they're not the best communicators in the world, that's for sure. But it's, at some point they got to grow up. You got to grow up and be able to have those kind of conversations and talk and communicate with the coach on like what is the best way you can help the team, but also put yourself and your health at the forefront and as a priority.
Just like the conversation even around how do you handle the offseason, I do think there's so much context and nuance around this and where the kid's at career-wise, what his goals are. And we've had better luck with some of the the baseball development is huge. There's kids getting drafted out of high school, and we've had better luck in those situations of being able to communicate a little bit better and couch it in the right way. That's like, hey, you can have this kid for the playoffs for those last couple times, but here's what we're going to do leading up to that, because he has the combine and the draft at this date. And if we mishandle this, like, it's going to affect his future. And it's just I think it's a wider conversation. And we're just getting into when we started Kinetic, which was 8 years ago in April, our first patient was a shared patient with you guys that was early in his MLB career, had Tommy John, and I could comfortably look him in the eyes and say, the good news is we're only gonna have to do this once. We know statistically it's very unlikely that's ever gonna happen again. And that honestly is, today I cannot have that same conversation. It's getting to the point that if a young man has surgery like that in high school, I can almost say it's more likely than not that he's going to have a revision if he continues to play long enough, because they're just not lasting that long. And it just is like, the longer we can take care of these kids' arms, as soon as they have that first arm injury, the rest of their career, they're just more at risk. And we're just seeing it happen at 8, 9, 10, 11, little leaguer's elbow. And then it's a forearm flexor strain in high school. And then it's a UCL strain right before college. And then they blow out and now they have surgery. And it just it's happening earlier and earlier. It's the stuff that used to happen in college and early in their pro careers is happening in early in their high school careers. And then it's just putting them behind the 8 ball from there on out. Yeah, we're going to have to go a separate podcast on that one. I don't want to take too much more of your time here, but maybe just a quick suggestion of, as people are starting to ramp up, build up, and increase throwing a little bit, some just general suggestions, guidance on how do they sequence that into their training week, where they're able to do both things, still get stronger and more explosive, while also starting to get the arm ramped up and prepare for the skill side of baseball.
So kind of like general guidelines, and kind of like, this is how I kind of structure the throwing and lifting side for our athletes, right? So like early off season, like guys will be throwing about 3 times a week. The intensity will kind of vary. It's a slow progression of, building intensity, building workload and volume there. During that period where we're kind of ramping up and early in the ramp up phase, like that is where like the heaviest lifting should be done, right? So like, thinking of training economy and how much, training dollar you have to spend each day, each week, right? So what it kind of looks like for, a typical one of my athletes is like, they're throwing 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday, Wednesday, Friday will also be their heaviest lifting day. So that way we can kind of consolidate the stress there. It will be a full body day and some long toss. Tuesday will be, movement capacity day where we're working on like armchair mobility side of things. Wednesday, another like full body day or heavier lifting day, maybe a little bit more extended long toss with some compressions. Thursday, like a recovery day. Again, no throw. Friday, either, depending on like where they're at in their phase, it's probably just going to be another long toss day, or if they're like later in their progression, might be like a mound blend kind of day if they're a pitcher. But as like the throwing workload and volume increases and we're throwing higher intensities more often, the stress levels from a throwing standpoint are getting higher and higher. Typically the weightlifting volume is going to drop, right? The intensity isn't necessarily going to drop in most cases, but the volume of, your training would drop typically to just try and like leave some room for that throwing side of things. So as like athletes are going through their off season, as you're throwing more and more, as you're getting, higher intent and higher volumes from the throwing side of things, you typically want to drop the training volume a little bit, keep the intensity still high to, progress from a strength standpoint, from a physicality standpoint. And then as we get kind of closer and closer to that season, that's where like the intensity from like a overall load volume or a load sense will drop, but the intent is fast. I'm trying to be powerful. I'm trying to move, heavier weight as fast as I can. Again, volume is going to be down a little bit. Throwing workload, that is where, when we get to February or January, February, March, that's where like, okay, this is where like the main focus, the meat and potatoes of everything is the skill development side of things, the skill side, the weightlifting, the training side of things now becomes not on the back burner, but it's not now the main focus, right? We have worked from September to, November, December range on building that workload and building that physical capacity. Now in January, February, March, like that's where we start blending into. Now we're working on, the skill capacity and, can we build the throwing volume to where it needs to be ready for March? Can we, work on the swing and make sure that we're doing like, challenging BP, working off machines, things like that. That's where also like from a throwing side of things, your execution pens are happening, pitch design work is happening. We're, getting at the later end of, the velocity phases, things like that.
That's really good guidance, and it's people can almost visualize it's two diverging lines on a graph. Mm-hmm. Like the more you're throwing, the more important throwing is. I don't want to say it's less important, but the more that the weight room just becomes supporting that skill versus the earlier side, you sacrifice the throwing to focus on that physical development. So I think that's really good guidance. All right, man, now that you're all warmed up, you're 45 minutes into your first podcast, we're going to hit the hard-hitting questions, some just quick, rapid-fire, fun questions. Answers can be as long or as short as you want. What'd be your favorite?
Oh, if we're talking specifically just in the weight room, probably some kind of like Bulgarian variation. I'm a big Bulgarian guy. I'm a big single leg guy. I love those. Last year I was on a journey to try and Zercher skater squat, which if any of you ever try that, it is miserable. Don't do it. It is not a fun time, but I tried to get 225 and that I failed miserably on that. But I think once I clean this shoulder up, we're going to get back on that journey because I did a couple reps the other day. I was like, dang, this is a lot easier. Yeah. But I would say a Bulgarian variation, if not just solely specific to the weight room, I would just say chucking medicine balls as hard as you can. I love medicine balls. I love medicine ball work. I think those should be a staple in every athlete's program, whether we're talking about baseball players or not, in some fashion capacity. Throwing medicine balls is really beneficial.
Okay, so let's take baseball Billy, the underweight, underpowered young athlete. What's his best meal to try to gain weight?
Oh, it's got to be something at breakfast. That's where like guys just miss the most on. Like the amount of kids that I see come in here that, I always ask them about the nutrition stuff and they always have just either a terrible breakfast or they don't eat breakfast at all. Right. So I think like, I do overnight oats and those Kodiak frozen waffles, like so good and just so easy and convenient. I've also had guys like, and this is the one that has been the most common that has stuck with guys, is like meal prep. It can be boring. It can kind of suck and be inconvenient sometimes for guys, but like it takes 5 minutes to fry up some bacon, make some scrambled eggs, and just make a little breakfast burrito. Do that. Like so easy. It's so easy. It does not take, I timed myself last time I talked with an athlete. He was like, it just takes too long. I'm like, what are you doing? How does it take 25 minutes for you to scramble eggs, cook bacon and wrap it up and throw it in the fridge for, the next 3 days. How? I timed myself. It took me 6 minutes. Like, there's no way it takes you 25 minutes. Just make a breakfast burrito, man.
That's great. Okay, so eat breakfast if you wanna start hitting your goals. Okay, now we're gonna start irritating some people. We're gonna make some enemies online. What's the most overrated drill in baseball?
Oh, most overrated drill? I don't know. I think, and I'm going after like traditional strength conditioning coaches here because I think the Olympic lifts are just so unnecessary for like baseball development. I know a lot of like college strength coaches that are still ripping Olympic lifts, like cleans, snatches. There's a program that is still ripping snatches, and I'm all out on that. I'm all out on the Olympics.
Okay, better way to build power potentially. All right, if you had what's your best piece of advice if you got a young freshman that wants to make varsity this year?
Young freshman that wants to make varsity this year. The best piece of advice I could give him is, that's a tough one. I would say the best piece of advice I could give him is be okay making sacrifices. Like, especially as a freshman, you're going to, like, as a young kid, 13, 14, 15 years old, little freshman, it's easy for you to get distracted. It's easy for you to, miss out on certain things or certain things in your baseball development because, it's not convenient for you, right? You're going to have to make sacrifices. You're going to have to put the phone down and stop being on TikTok until, midnight or 1 a.m. during the weekdays, or staying up with the boys and playing Fortnite or whatever the hell kids playing nowadays on the Xbox and staying up until 2 a.m., right? It's easy to get distracted by those things, right? Because that's what you've done as a kid, right? And those are the easy things. And, those are the moments with your boys that, you cherish forever. And I still cherish those from when I did it back in the day. But, if you really want to make the big goals and lofty goals a reality, you have to make sacrifices to make those things happen, right? And not everybody fully understands that. And not everybody is fully prepared to do that. And to be honest with you, if you're not prepared to make sacrifices for the goals that you have, you're probably not really wanting those goals as bad as you say you do.
It's good advice. And early December right now, as we said, tryouts aren't till March. So can't wait till, if it's the week before, it's probably too late at that point to start making the sacrifices.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate your time. We're going to have to get another one of these scheduled for early in 2026 because we missed a couple of key sections that I want to get your opinion on. Maybe we can talk some in-season training. But in the meantime, If anyone wants to learn more about you and what you have going on at BRX, where can they find you guys online?
Yeah, so you guys can go online to brxperformance.com. If you're interested in getting more information, we have a form on the website that you can fill out and reach out to us about, inquiring about training. I will be the one reaching out to you. So if you guys have any interest in learning more about us, who we are, what we do, and how we can possibly help you, go to our website, click the form, fill that out, and we'll communicate with you soon.
Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your day. Appreciate the time, and thanks to everyone for listening. We'll see you guys on the next episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you.